For the first time in 20 years, antitrust in the US is coming after big tech. Google this week was sued by the Department of Justice for using illegal methods to maintain its dominance in the search market. Should other tech companies be worried? What does this mean for my stock portfolio? Watch this video to find out. But before I get started, if it's your first time here, welcome to wealthwins, the channel that gets you closer to financial independence every week. My name's Kevin, and if you're interested in learning how to form investment strategies and other topics in personal finance, subscribe to the channel. Now for some background. The DOJ case relies on the Sherman Act, passed in 1890 and last used to try to unbundle Microsoft from every PC on Earth back in 1998. During the early and mid-1990s, Microsoft used their dominance in the operating system market with Windows to make manufacturers of PCs agree to bundle Internet Explorer with every copy of Windows sold to the market. That led to their dominance not just in the PC market, but also in the web browser market, where their primary competition was Netscape. What Microsoft did is they tightly coupled Internet Explorer and Windows so that if you tried to uninstall Internet Explorer and tried to install a different browser instead, your machine became really slow and sometimes basically unusable. So Microsoft basically used their positioning with Windows to make it so that if you didn't choose Internet Explorer, you couldn't choose basically any browser. Yet despite using their influence to limit the options for consumers, thereby hurting consumer welfare, Microsoft walked away with basically a slap on the wrist. They weren't forced to change their business tactics, nor were they forced to break up their operating system business from their web browser business. The standard that has been established in the antitrust in the US is that business practices that use restrictive contracts to undermine competition are considered anti-competitive because they undermine consumer welfare. You could argue that in 1998, not very many people were that tech savvy.
Ever since you fixed that paper gem, my computer has been running slower.
And so if you bundled Internet Explorer as the default option in Windows, not very many people are going to go look for an alternative web browser like Netscape. Honestly, if you used Internet Explorer in the late 90s, you know what a hot piece of garbage that was. Also, does anyone remember dial-up? Well, maybe not if you're Gen Z and you're watching. What about this time? Well, it's a pretty similar argument. The federal government is basically saying that because Google establishes exclusive contracts with companies like Apple to make Google search the default search in iPhones, that this harms consumer welfare. Their argument is that Google should have to compete in the free market with every other search engine out there, rather than using contracts to maintain their market positioning. But does it really harm consumer welfare? I mean, if I told you that there were other search engines out there like Bing and DuckDuckGo, would you say, yeah, I'd love to switch? Or would you really go, that's cool, but I get what I need from Google? I'm not a legal expert by any means, but by the litmus test of consumer welfare, I think Google provides that in spades. So how does this impact my investing strategy? In short, it doesn't. As an investment vehicle, I love monopolies. That might not be that popular of an opinion, but I think they have a ton of advantages. They generally have the highest margins, the highest market share, obviously, the highest barriers to entry, and usually they grow much faster than the general economy by leveraging their market position to enter adjacent markets. If we look at the charts of some monopolies, Facebook, Amazon, Google, you'll see that they grow much faster than the economy at large, as reflected by their stock prices over the last 5 years, 10 years. However, it doesn't mean that all monopolies grow equally. For example, AT&T basically has a near duopoly with Verizon in the US, but because of poor management, it still doesn't maximize its market positioning to its maximum potential. Also, it's got crappy products. If you're already holding on to Google stock, I don't think antitrust is really going to impact your returns all that much. If you look at the timing of the announcement, you'll notice that the stock market had basically no reaction to the antitrust announcement. In fact, Google stock actually rose the next day along with the rest of the market. Antitrust moves pretty slowly. A trial, if it comes, will come in a year's time. And a final decision, including time for any appeals, could take 2 to 3 years. If anything worries me, it's the shrinking gross margins at Alphabet, going from 61% in 2016 to 51% last quarter. Although there's still healthy top-line revenue growth to offset shrinking margins. Sometimes there's not as much upside in a monopoly because they're often the leader in a mature market, but there's also much more limited downside as well. The ton of value, however, is buying into monopolies that are in growing markets. Take, for example, Amazon. Half of all searches for shopping start on Amazon, which is mind-blowing. It's crazy. But online shopping still only accounts for 10% of overall spending, and so there's still a ton of room for growth. Amazon could be the first $10 trillion company just by virtue of the shift from brick and mortar spending to online. Sometimes news does move stock prices. So if in the future antitrust comes after Amazon and you see a 7% or 10% drop in price, you bet on buying more. Antitrust litigation is just part of the cost of doing business when you're in a monopolistic position like Google is. Over the past 5 to 10 years, Google has been fighting a stricter version of antitrust in Europe, and outside of financial penalties, it's been doing just fine. It's similar in some ways to those settlements made by banks or pharmaceuticals for alleged misconduct. Unless there is a dramatic shift in the way antitrust is interpreted, or there's an introduction of new antitrust laws, I find it hard to believe based on historical precedent that Google or Amazon or Apple or Facebook are going to get unbundled anytime soon. These companies identified and solved problems using technology in a way where they're now interwoven into the lives of the US population and with each other, for better or for worse. If you found this content educational, smash that like button for the YouTube algorithm, comment down below, and subscribe to the channel. Until next time.